This is Rebel Rod, grandson of Jack Donelson. Jack Donelson was born in Crab Orchard, Tennessee, and born under some duress, and basically was uh, shadowed greatly by the Donelson name in Tennessee. So much so that he ended up moving to Crossville, Tennessee, with my grandmother and my mother, and joining the Trailways bus drivers and the Masonic Temple there on the turnabout between Cincinnati and Crossville, Tennessee. He was married to my grandmother for a number of years and died in 1969. His life was basically working and taking care of his family. And the extended family were quite active as well. And so one day my grandmother sat down with me and we started to discuss things. And since he had died before I was born, I was curious. And I told her that my uncle on the Ham side of the family, my Uncle Paul, he had done a tremendous amount of research into the Ham family and had traced them all the way back to the 1700s, if not further. And she said, my family never did keep records too much. And I said, really? And she said, no. She said it would have been nice to have had the Smith records, but we didn't really keep them down in Tennessee. And I said, okay. And she said, your grandpa, they kept records on. I said, really? And she said, the Donelsons are one of the great families of Tennessee. And I said, they are. And she said, oh, yeah. She said, they lived in the White House. I said, really? And she said, yeah. They were married to President Jackson. And that's the first I had heard of it. And I did a lot of research since then to go back through the Donelson family. And if you go back to John Donelson, who came from Ireland, settled for a little bit in Canada and ended up down in Virginia, you'll find that he served in the House of Burgesses there in Franklin County, and also created a furnace company, which has to be one of the first furnace companies on the East Coast. He was very active in politics and became a land surveyor responsible for creating the state lines. And then once he got to a certain point in his life, he took 11 children and Rachel Stockley, and they began to explore through the Cumberland Gap in Tennessee. There was a son who, or grandson, named Stockley Donelson, and he got out and was the founder of Crab Orchard, Tennessee, which is where I believe my grandpa was born at. And so the other Donelsons left on with John, and John went to a place called Fort Nashville and traveled quite a bit between there and Kentucky through the little ridge there. And his daughter, the aunt of Stockley Donelson, Rachel, she became involved in a marriage that became scrutinized later to a man, Lewis Roberts. And Lewis Roberts was your typical Kentuckian. He was a jealous man, and not saying Kentuckians are jealous, I'm just saying he was. But he was, a very primitive type man there locally. And I think that lifestyle became old on her because Rachel had spent her life sort of traveling around and doing things like that. So the marriage life wasn't working out for her. And they agreed upon it. And she left to go join her father at Fort Nashville. And he was finishing up his project, his personal project there in Fort Nashboro, when she became involved with a man named Andrew Jackson. And they left, sort of eloped down in the Mississippi area, Louisiana, and became married. And the rest of their life is in the rest of my book. But John Donelson did something very significant when he founded Fort Nashboro and called it Nashville, Tennessee. And so if you go into that area of Tennessee or a lot of other areas, you're going to hear about my family, the Donelsons, and how much that they contributed to Tennessee, to the Southern way of life, to the history classes that are taught today, and to the White House in Washington, D.C., where they were the only family to ever have 3 first ladies serve a president in President Jackson. Rachel Donelson died upon the election of Andrew Jackson, and she was ill and had some conversations about her disdain for the idea of going to Washington. She had been through a bitter campaign. Her name had been just thrown about, something terrible. And it had to have been a miserable feeling of her, probably a lot of social anxiety. And that combined with her health started to take her on a downhill slope. And she had talked to Andrew Jackson Donelson, whom she had raised, and also Emily Donelson, whom she had raised, and talked to them about assisting General Jackson as he began this endeavor to change the direction of our country, and acted as the First Lady, even though it was before the inauguration, and you'll never change my mind on that. She had given enough in civil service through the Hermitage and through the activity of General Jackson's absolute dominance in American politics, American military, and American might, that she deserves that First Lady title, and died before she could actually get it. Emily took over in her mid-20s, and as she did, she began to grow inside of the political juggernaut of Andrew Jackson, and also her husband, who became the first Secretary of State, blossomed with her under Jackson in the White House in Washington, D.C., and became a significant part of American politics. The Donelsons were very active in the community. They were active in the Tennessee community to a point to where they were recognized in a dedication of another Tennessee town called Donelson, Tennessee. So if you're ever in Tennessee, I suggest that you visit the Hermitage House and pay homage to the great Emily Donelson.